All right, okay. Let's go. Hello everybody, welcome to my channel and another thrift flip video. I'm very excited for this one, and I know I say that every time, but I'm actually super excited for this video because instead of thrift flipping some clothing, I'm going to turn this glass container into a terrarium. Terrariums are one of my biggest hobbies and I love them so much. It's become a bit of an obsession, so I'm very excited to share with you guys how to make one. So let's get started. Our adventure begins in your own backyard. While walking around your neighborhood, look for plants and moss. Since I live on the West Coast, there's a ton of moss. Thanks, rain. So I'm going to fill my terrarium with mostly moss. When you find a healthy patch, you can grab a small amount and then push the moss back over the hole you just made. Terrariums made with local plants are called native terrariums. This one is my favorite kind of moss. I think it's called Catherine's moss. Oops, I definitely grabbed way too much. Grab some of this guy, fill in the hole. When I'm collecting, I use a reusable mesh bag to store all of my plants in. Using rocks and sticks that already have moss on them are more likely to be successful and happy in your terrarium. This rock looks perfect. We also are going to need some rocks to line the bottom. These river rocks should be perfect. Bringing multiple bags is a good idea so that your substrate doesn't crush your plants. We also will need some soil. It's a good idea to grab some soil from the same place where you find your plants. You can also use dirt from your backyard or potting soil, or a mix of any of them. I have a bit of a collection of plants that I have found on previous walks, so I'm going to pull from there instead of pulling new ones. I also have this weird onion boy houseplant. He's shooting off little baby onions, so I'm going to see if they'll be happy in the terrarium. Okay, all of our hunting and gathering is complete. Now we're going to rinse the things that we found outside. For the moss, I'm mostly washing off excess debris and some dirt. A lot of little bugs live in the moss, and it's actually beneficial to have them in your terrarium, so hopefully some of them stay on during the wash. I move the rocks into a plastic container and fill it with water. I agitate the bucket, dump out the water, and repeat until the water runs clear. Most of the tools I use are common household items: a long paintbrush, a chopstick, long tweezers, plastic spoon taped to a chopstick. I call this spoon stick. Some additional things we will need are dechlorinated water, carbon or charcoal, milky, paper towel or microfiber cloth, and a glass container. I will list these all in the description below. Okay, I think we're ready to go. First thing we're going to do is wash out our glass container. I'm just using the dechlorinated water. I'm wiping the sides down with a paper towel. Next we add our rocks. This rock layer is called a false bottom. It creates a place for the excess water to sit and not saturate the soil. You can play with the size and shape of the false bottom rocks. You can even use marbles or sand. Just be aware that because sand is so tightly packed, water will not flow through it as easily. Sand would be a better option for plants such as cactuses because they don't require as much water. The depth of this layer depends on the size of your terrarium. I'm going to do a layer about 2 finger widths deep. Next is the carbon or charcoal. You can get activated carbon from aquarium stores. Alternatively, you could use charcoal. There are lots of charcoal options, just don't use charcoal briquettes. I put a thin layer of carbon on top of the false bottom. This layer purifies the water as it passes through during the water cycle. Our next layer is a mesh barrier. This layer is optional, but it helps create a separation between the false bottom and the soil that will be above it. I used a scrap piece of polyester fabric. It's important that the mesh barrier is not an organic material. Something such as polyester would be great because it's not going to break down. Window screen is a really great option here. The next layer is the soil. Since I'm mostly adding moss into this terrarium, we don't need much soil. So I'm mostly going to add enough soil for the aesthetic look that I'm going for. If you're using plants with larger root systems, then it's better to add more soil so they can grow. I'm using a paintbrush to spread out my soil. I decided that I wanted to use the rock with the moss as my centerpiece. Perfect fit. So I'm going to put that in next and build up more soil around it. I decide to fill the whole back with soil, creating a mountain. Adding in rocks and sticks for decoration is called hardscaping. Here comes Milky. She wanted to see what was going on. Next, I'm going to add the moss that I found. I think this one is called hypnum moss. I have the most of this one, so I'm going to spread it along the front and up the sides. I use my paintbrush, chopstick, and tweezers to help push the moss in place. Thankfully, the opening of my glass container is quite large and my hand can fit in, but containers with smaller openings, the tweezers are very helpful. Next, I'm going to add in my little onion baby. Because he has long tendrils, I'm going to put him at the top of the mountain and have his tendrils hang over it like long vines. Next is my favorite moss. I use a bunch of little pieces of moss that I have from previous gatherings. I'm going to add a few small rocks for detail. Next, we're going to add water. I pour in water and try to angle it onto the walls to clean off any debris. I watch as the water flows down into the false bottom. Once my false bottom has enough water in it, I call it done. With the same paper towel, I'm going to dry off the glass walls and wipe away any more debris. We can pop on the lid. Ideally, a glass lid is better because it lets in excess light. And here is our beautiful terrarium. Because we made a closed terrarium, our water will stay in the system, and the terrarium will not need to be watered. Every morning, the water in your terrarium will evaporate and form on the walls of your terrarium as condensation. Then it will fall back onto the plants and soil as precipitation and collect into the false bottom once again. This cycle occurs every day, and the water becomes cleansed as it passes through the carbon or charcoal in your false bottom. As long as the lid of your terrarium is on tight and you have no water escaping, you should never have to water it ever again. It is the easiest houseplant you will ever have. Thank you guys so much for making a terrarium with me. I'm so happy with what we made. Hopefully you guys will go make your own terrarium, and I would love to see what you make. So please tag me or send me some pictures. And we will see you on the next video. Bye!